Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, or good evening, depending on where you're joining us from. And thanks for joining another Salesforce release webinar with me, Keir Belden. This is the Summer 24 release of Salesforce, and it looks like attendees are chugging in quite nicely, so I think I'm going to begin. So here's the topics we'll be covering today. They don't tend to change much, so I won't read them out loud. And you can see on the right, that's me. Well, that's me from a few years ago, actually, looking at the color of my hair. And you can contact me on Twitter, /X, or LinkedIn at those links shown. So as usual, our first topic is fond farewells, features that have served us well, but are coming to the end of their useful life. If you're using the Engage for Gmail Chrome extension, and this is part of the Marketing Cloud Account Engagement product, formerly known as Pardot, I believe, that is retiring very soon, so in June, a couple of days. And this is because Google are disabling Manifest v2, which is what this is built on, the platform this is built on essentially. You can continue to send emails directly from Salesforce using account engagements, sales emails, and alerts. Salesforce Functions, I think we've heard about its retirement for longer than it was in beta. So one of the very short-lived features of Salesforce. These are retiring in just under a year. So if you've built anything on this, then the advice is to recreate using a platform like Heroku. But obviously you'll have to handle the authentication, the integration yourself. You'll lose anything that used to come for, not exactly for free, but used to be included with the functions. Einstein automated contacts go at the beginning, or not the beginning, but early next year. And then looking a little further out, API versions 21 through 30 will be retiring in summer 25. So this was originally scheduled for summer 23, but it got pushed back by a couple of years to give everybody more time to upgrade their integrations. Summer 25 sounds like a long time away, but it's only a year from now. So if you have anything that's relying on those API versions, then you want to get to work on them as soon as you can, because it's surprising how quickly that time will go. Standard volume platform events, they're going in around a year as well. You haven't been able to create these since spring 19, so it'll only be legacy ones that you haven't upgraded yet. But if you do have any, you want to replace those with high volume events. Streaming API versions, they're also retiring, 23 through 36. Scheduled for October this year, October next year, which is the summer 25. Sorry, that is this year. It's the winter 25 release. Yeah, because this is summer 24. The next release is winter 25. So yeah, again, update those at your earliest convenience. There's quite a chunk of API versions retiring then. Legacy chat is Happy Valentine's Day in 2026. That will be the end of that. And the final one is quite forward-looking, but that's because Salesforce for Outlook retirement has been pushed back 3 and a bit years. It was scheduled for this release, summer 24, but it's now been pushed back to December 2027. So I guess a lot of Salesforce customers are still using it and didn't feel they could upgrade that quickly. Okay, moving on to some general enhancements. Just as an aside, as usual, as has been usual for the last couple of webinars, I've been using ChatGPT to generate these images. So this is DALL-E 3 running on the ChatGPT 4 Omni, or the GPT 4 Omni model. And one of the things that they seem to have got a lot better at is actually putting the text I want in the image. So I said I want a ticket representing general admission, and it's actually spelled it as general admission, whereas typically what happened with the previous models, it would be called something like general Adson or something like that. It always seemed to spell it wrong intentionally, so it didn't exactly match what you asked for, maybe for copyright reasons. But all of a sudden, they seem to have started working as I expected. So that's really good. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Browser support slide. This really doesn't change these days. It's always the latest Edge, Chromium, Chrome, Firefox, and Safari. For most applications, Classic Console doesn't support Safari, and Lightning Experience on the iPad, unsurprisingly, is Safari only. There's a new setup domain in summer 24, and this applies regardless of which edition user interface you're working with, so any edition, Classic or Lightning. And this will be applied on a rolling basis once the release goes live. The key message here is if you have allow lists that include Salesforce setup domains, you'll need to add salesforce-setup.com to continue to provide access to your admins. Google Chrome storage partitioning is being applied in Summer 24, which isn't actually something I was particularly familiar with. I'm familiar with local storage, but the partitioning concept is new to me. And the reason that's coming in is the left-hand side is the way things have been working to now, which is if you've got an iframe which is embedded in a couple of different sites, essentially they can communicate with each other. So that the iframe embedded on a.com can put something into local storage. And then the iframe embedded in b.com can pull that information out of local storage, which is a really good way to leak data. So not something that is particularly well liked. So the local storage is now additionally partitioned based on the iframe, sorry, the domain that the iframe appears in. So essentially the behavior now is the right-hand side of the diagram. The iframe embedded in b.com will only be allowed to retrieve information that it's stored from b.com. It can't access the information that's stored by the same iframe from a.com, even if it has the same domain. So essentially the local storage is now restricted to a combination of the iframe domain and the containing domain. So if you've got any applications which rely on any solutions that rely on local storage, you need to test those. And if you need more time, you can opt out until September 2024. So another, 3-ish months. Einstein Search now has a search manager where you can create configurations for channels, create rules to filter searches for users, define objects that should always be searched, regardless of what the user's asking for. Quite like that one. Decide which fields should appear in search indexes and which should be protected or removed entirely, again, helping to stop data leakage. An advanced lookup search now shows up to 100 results. So if you've got a lot of similar data, be prepared to see a lot of results. The following updates are being enforced in summer 24. First one may catch you out. So redirections will only be allowed to URLs in the trusted URLs for redirects allow lists. So if it's not in there, then the user won't be sent wherever you're hoping to send them. So make sure you've updated that list. The email simple invocable action now respects org-wide profile settings. So if it's configured with an incorrect profile, the user will get an error rather than send in their email, which they might not be too happy about. The Oracle JDK locale formats are being replaced with the international components for Unicode versions. So these are more consistent and compliant with our other applications. If you're still using the legacy single configuration SAML framework, you'll see an update that turns it off and only leaves you with the multi-configuration version. So best to migrate to that. And also flows initiated by a bot will run in the context of the bot user rather than the system context. So they'll be much more restricted in what they're able to see and what they're able to do. For all these updates, check out the help for details. Make sure you test prior to the activation date. These are the release updates scheduled for the next release. I won't go into them because it's likely that some of them will get pushed back. That pretty much always seems to happen. But when I share the deck, if you think you'll be impacted by any of these, now's a good time to start working on them. Moving on to analytics. All analytics collections are now available as components on Lightning pages, whereas previously it was just the first analytics collection. So in the Lightning App Builder, you choose the CRM Analytics collection shown with the 1 bubble here, and then pick the selection from the list shown with the 2 bubble. And a collection can be CRM, Lightning, or Tableau Analytics items. There's a few enhancements in the visualization and sharing in CRM Analytics. Conditional formatting is now available in waterfall charts. So in the example here, it's configured so that if the product container is Jumbo Drum, it will render as white text on a red background, which it does with the second entry in the waterfall from the left there. And you can also embed CRM Analytics dashboards in Lightning Web runtime sites or on Lightning App Builder pages using the new Lightning Web component. Next, we have customization. And I think there's a nod to Chris Duarte there in terms of the customization that's taken place on those sneakers. And this is a somewhat lengthy topic in this release, as there's some great new features. So we'll spend a little bit more time on this than we usually do, I think. So here's the first one that I really like, the user access summary. So this gives details of the permissions that have been assigned to a user across user, object, field, and custom permissions plus the public groups and queues they are a member of. This, I think, will save loads of time compared to clicking through all of the setup pages that contain this information, as we have had to in the past. There's a similar summary page to show where a public group is being used, which sharing rules it's referenced in, if it's included in other public groups, or if it's used to control access to list views. And then there's a third and final summary detailing what permissions are granted by permission sets and permission set groups. And once again, user, object, field, and custom permissions are detailed here. So these changes, we have Cheryl Feldman to thank once again. Anything awesome around permissions, around users, around roles, profiles, etc. She's doing a bang up job. And as I say, I think these are going to save a huge amount of time because it gives so much more clarity when you're trying to understand why somebody has access to something. You're not having to dig around through loads and loads of different pages. So that's awesome. Sticking with permissions and sharing, user access policies allow you to automatically add or remove users from permission sets or public groups or grant or revoke package licenses based on user record criteria. So you can define up to 200 of these policies. And if a user does match more than one, there's an order field that will be used to determine which one applies to that user. So a way of effectively programmatically doing something with a user based on the criteria of that user. If you've got an awful lot of moving users around, this could save you a fair bit of time again. There's a couple of new permissions on the user side of things. There's the freeze users permission, which, as the name suggests, allows you to freeze or unfreeze users, while the monitor login history allows access to the login history on user records and also access to the view login history reports. So these are automatically enabled for users who have the manage users permission. And the reason is that the manage users permission gave you these two things and a load of other stuff, which wasn't necessarily a good idea. So if you've got users who just need to be the ability to freeze and to look at login history, then you can turn off their manage user permission and better adhere to the principle of least privilege. In the Lightning App Builder, you can use a align fields horizontally checkbox to improve the alignment. So the left-hand side shows what happens if you're just using regular blank space. It takes up a single filled cell. Doesn't, because there's a combination aligned very well, whereas the right-hand side shows using blank space and the align fields horizontally checkbox, and that moves the website field nicely down to be on the same level as that which is under the billing address. So yeah, looks a lot nicer. Be interested to see what happens when there's some conditional formatting, sort of conditional visibility on some of these things, which I think is something that's coming soon. But anyway, I'd also note that the blank space, so within dynamic forms, you're allowed 100 fields per region, and blank space counts as a field, so it consumes an item from that limit. 100 fields is quite a lot, though. If you've got that many, you might want to consider your choices there. This is something that I'm really pleased about. I've wanted this for ages. This is conditional visibility on custom tabs in a Lightning App Builder record page. So in the example shown here, I've got a tab on the account record page, and that tab is called sysadmin info. And this is where I can store information that I want available to administrators, but I want regular users to be able to see them. So when a regular user accesses this account page, they only see the tabs for related records, details, and activities. Whereas when it's a system administrator, they've got access to the sysadmin tab and they see the secret squirrel information. So what this means is if you do want to have different tab setups effectively based on user profiles, you won't need all the separate user record pages that you've probably got at the moment assigned to each of those profiles. So it should allow you to reduce the amount of those you're having to maintain going forward, which is always nice. Couple more changes in the app builder. You can now apply heading styles in rich text components, and when you preview a page with dynamic forms, it will respect the compact density setting. So that's nice, and you'll spot that due to the reduced heights of fields in those field sections. Continuing nicely on the theme of dynamic forms, there's a new step in the field creation wizard, which allows you to add it as the last field in the first section of a dynamic forms enabled page. So much like the original kind of classic page layouts allowed you to add it to a page layout as effectively the last element of the first section. But you'll only see this if dynamic forms enabled pages. It already exists for the S object. And in a similar vein, the dynamic forms enabled pages will now appear in where is this used for a particular custom field. So moving on to development. This is my favorite topic, both for pro and low code. Again, your reminder that Lightning Web Components have component level versioning. So if you want the Summer 24 features, you'll need to upgrade to API version 61. So component lifecycle hooks, which are the functions executed when things happen like a component being rendered, will now use native browser APIs where possible. So you'd expect those to be faster and more performant. Older browsers will continue to receive a synthetic polyfill to allow them to handle these things. Oh, sorry, jumped ahead there. There are some changes coming to the native DOM implementation and to the Lightning design system, which may break any customization you've made if you've done customizations based on the underlying rendered HTML, which obviously the docs advise against. But if you have done it, you've taken that risk and you've rolled the dice, you need to be prepared to spend some time fixing those once this release is live. And Lightning Web Components can now be used directly in the utility bar. You no longer need to wrap them in Aura components. So your code can access the utility bar API through the import of Lightning Platform Utility Bar API. And if you want to be able to drop your component into the utility bar, it needs to declare the utility bar target to appear as an option in the UI. In API 61, you can access the Element Internals Web API, which applies to light and native shadow DOM only, so not synthetic DOM. So this has a couple of aspects to it. First, a component can have default area attributes and roles, even without an explicit area attribute, so making them more accessible. And secondly, a component can associate itself with a form. And this allows it to submit its state as part of a form submission, respond to lifecycle events like a user clicking the reset button, and also let the form know if it's in a valid state, which might not sound like much, but this allows you to decouple your form from its content. So rather than having to have an overarching form management component that is managing every element else inside it, knowing what's there, knowing whether it's valid or not, that can be left up to each of the individual components in it, which means you can just assemble those from an admin perspective rather than needing to go in as a developer and code them up that way. So I think this would be really good for that kind of decoupling exercise. The link we've got here, the webkit.org link, has a really good overview of the Element Internals API and some examples, but bear in mind those are vanilla HTML and JavaScript rather than Lightning Web Component specific. So another change I'm very pleased to see, URL addressable Lightning Web Components. So what this will allow users to do is navigate directly to Lightning Web Components rather than having to wrap them in Aura, Visualforce, Lightning App Builder pages, or something else. So you have to declare an URL addressable target, and then once you've done that, you can use the navigation mix-in and simply specify the component name here, which is C__my component, C being in the local namespace. If you note underneath, you've also got a state stanza that allows you to specify parameters effectively in the URL, and these can then be accessed in the target component using the current page ref.state and then the property name. A little bit of a blast from the past. There's a change to Visualforce pages in that they'll all be served on the force.com domain or on the domain of the site that contains them going forward. So if you have any references to the historic salesforce.com domain that they used to be served on, update those. And this will allow you to continue to access even when browsers block third-party cookies. Moving on to Apex, which now supports Data Cloud Model Objects, also known as DMOs. Note that when you query DMOs, that can cost you data services credits, and you definitely want to exercise caution if you're going to put code in there that can make multiple calls For example, if you've embedded a query in a loop and that can run several hundred times, that could end up costing you real money. And you can see below an example of retrieving information from the unified individual data model object. Sticking with Apex and Data Cloud, there's a few security items to make you aware of. Apex running in system mode, Data Cloud model objects will be accessible from all spaces, even if there isn't a permission set that grants access to those spaces. Data Cloud, if the user has access to a data space, you can make read-only object checks to assume what they're doing is valid via the schema describe valid functionality, the with clause, or using the security.strip inaccessible method. But there is no support for field level or record level access control at present. So if you're using Apex to do this, you are opening it up a little bit. More Apex. When you click the compile all classes link, which is on the Apex classes homepage, if your code references objects that you aren't licensed to access, then you will see errors. So this behavior aligns with the behavior of metadata deployments and also on-demand compilations. That's really just bringing things together, but you might find that you get a surprise the first time that you click that. When you roll back a save point and you've created 4 update locks since you created that save point, they will be released, and you'll also see an entry in the debug log recording this and telling you what the most recently locked entity type was. And another feature I'm really pleased to see. It's been a great release for me, really. Apex exception emails will now include org name, username, and my domain name. So for those of us involved with loads of different orgs, this will save, I think, considerable amount of time trying to figure out what had actually happened in which org and what username I need to connect as that. Moving on to the API, you're going to need to update any API connections that use instance URLs, such as the example here, ap2.salesforce.com. Update that to use the my domain URL instead, buzzard.my.salesforce.com, if you had one called Buzzard. That way, they'll continue working even if you move to a different instance or you have an org migration. At the moment, the platform has some redirects to protect you from this, but those will stop working come the Winter 25 release this October. So something else to get on top of. You can now update records based on their external ID via the REST API using the update only parameter. So previously you had to use an upsert, which meant if it couldn't find a match, then it created a new record that you then had to clean up. So it should save that kind of work. And another change around profiles permissions, the Salesforce API only systems integration user profile, which is obsolete and has been, I think, for a couple of releases now, got replaced with the minimum access API only integrations. Oh yeah, since spring 24 actually. So this is the second release it's been obsolete. So as part of this release, Salesforce API only systems integrations will be converted from a standard to a custom profile. And what that means is you can move your users off of it and then you can delete it, which you can't do with a standard profile. Yet another feature I'm pleased about. It really is good to be me at the moment. Scratch org snapshots are generally available. So a snapshot is a point-in-time copy of a Scratch org that you can use to create other Scratch orgs. Effectively, it's like a template, and it includes installed packages, metadata, and crucially data. So it's a fully set up Scratch org you'll get at the end of this. You need to enable this in your Dev Hub, and you need to have someone fluent in the CLI to manage those snapshots. When you're creating Scratch orgs from a snapshot, you need a separate definition file, as rather than specifying the addition, you specify the snapshot name, and also there'll be far fewer configuration options available because the snapshot defines most of it. Snapshots expire after 90 days, and there was some discussion in the community about creating a snapshot from a snapshot, so we could just continue cycling that all the way through. Sadly, according to the docs, you can't. You can only create a snapshot if the source Scratch org wasn't created using a snapshot or indeed a namespace. So a little bit of a limitation there. Seems to be something that's likely to affect ISVs more than anyone else, but your mileage may vary. Few sandbox changes. If users don't log into a sandbox within 60 days of its creation, they'll be frozen out. And there's a new permission of manage dev sandboxes. So you can give this to someone and allow them to create developer and developer pro sandboxes. So you can empower your developers to be a bit more self-sufficient. But what they can't do is create a sandbox that copies any production data over. So they can't create full or partial copies. And you can also refresh a sandbox from the CLI. So if that's something you need to do as part of continuous integration, you'll be able to do that going forward. Flow next, and this is a feature I'm not sure I'm happy about, so it's not all good news this time. This is the auto generation of element names. So somebody has added in an element, get records, and it's just gone in there and it's automatically called that get records too, because there's already a get records there. So I know that the user is taken into the generated name, it auto focuses so they can update it, but I'm fully expecting in a few months' time there will be flows with get records 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and no one will know which one of those does what, because generally speaking, that's how things work out. So we shall watch with interest what happens with that. Flow now has a transform element, which is very cool. So you can map source data to target data, alter the data en route, etc. So in the example shown here, a sales agent has run a screen flow to return orders for store credit. So as the order data is stored outside of Salesforce, the flow has retrieved it, and then we need to transform it into a record that can be saved in Salesforce. So as you can see, there's some direct correlations there, but then the mapping between the amount fields uses a formula to transform the data, which reduces it by a fiver for a restocking fee, which seems quite excessive, but hey ho, good money if you can get it, I guess. And obviously once that data is transformed, it's then stored in a collection, etc. And you need further actions to store those records in Salesforce, potentially update the external order system. But yeah, transformation in there, which is very nice. Debugging scheduled flows just got a little bit easier. You can now skip the start conditions and enter regardless. And you can also choose which record you want to use in the debug session. So you can see that in the bubble 1 on the right, and then you can also see the number of records that were impacted by the flow shown with the bubble with a 2 against it. There is a new automation app to view and monitor flows. So it shows recently modified ones, any errors that have occurred, and also has links to Trailhead and the community. But note that you do need to enable this. You do need to enable this, and then it appears as an application rather than as part of setup, which seems to be something Salesforce are doing more and more. It seems like more of these things that kind of you can think of as a lot nearer to setup and making their way. I think email templates, Lightning email templates are in there. Kind of feels like the Lightning user interface is becoming more the one place we go to do things rather than having to bounce around back to setup. Obviously, still a considerable amount of stuff in setup though. In API 61, executing a subflow will now run the active version rather than the latest version, which is good news, but the fact that an inactive version might run may come as a surprise to you. It certainly did to me. And another very cool feature is the ability to specify category and subcategory labels for your flows. So you can see here I've got a category of samples and a subcategory of reactive elements. And then I can filter in the list view. So here I've said I want to filter on everything which has a category of samples. I've only got one in there at the moment, but this allows you to organize your flows a bit better and not be so overwhelmed with huge, great lists of them. Next up, a little bit on the Einstein platform. There's a number of new features in the generative AI space coming in this release. This is a monthly cycle rather than a 3 a year we're used to, mainly because things are moving so quickly. So you want to check back on the release notes every month going forward. Copilot went GA a few weeks ago, but I'm really pleased about that, so I'm calling that out again. And as you can see, I'm not going to list through all of them, but generative AI is starting to creep in to lots of different areas. So this is kind of noticeable that we've got Copilot, which is the generative AI that we can interact with the chatbot, and everything else is just kind of generative AI enhancements, but within the flow of work. You're not having to navigate to a separate tool. It's just in and of Salesforce rather than something else you have to work with. And there's a few changes to the AI bots. So you can now require a response and keep repeating the question if the response doesn't match your requirements. That might be good. It might annoy your customers. I guess you'll find out. You can connect the Copilot action, answer questions with knowledge to your bot. So basically, if the user asks a question or the customer asks a question that doesn't match to a dialogue, the action can then go and search the knowledge base to see if it can find a suitable answer and return that. Currently, this is only available in English. And also, every release, there's a new release version folder with the standard bot reports in it, and Summer 24 is no different. Moving on to Experience Cloud with a few changes around Aura and LWR sites, mostly LWR, I must say. So I mentioned earlier around LWC, the Lightning design system is receiving some changes that may break unsupported customizations. So if you've got any of those in your Aura and LWR sites, make sure to test those. Everything else is LWR sites. So you can connect Data Cloud to your enhanced LWR site, not the regular ones, to capture events as they occur, such as the profile of the user who is logged in and engaged and what engagement they are is taking place on your site. So you can then use that to further personalize things going forward. You can customize the layout of your site to ensure it looks its best regardless of the screen size it's displayed on, through things like component stacking, alignment and spacing. So almost like responsive design, I guess. Search Manager lets you create search configurations for LWR sites as well. And the record detail component now supports dependent pick lists. So when a user updates a controlling field, they'll see the dependent fields react. Another Visualforce change, public Visualforce site pages. By public, we mean those that are accessible to unauthenticated users. You don't have to log in to see them. So these will now be cached on the browser as well as the server, and they'll obviously load faster if they're cached in the browser. The setup audit trail now tracks more changes to Visualforce sites. Don't have any details on what those additional changes are, but obviously they're still, Visualforce sites are still very much in use. If you are using a shared domain certificate for the content delivery network, you'll need to move to one specific for your domain as part of new security requirements. And if you've got users who need to manage domains and custom URLs and nothing else, then you can give them the custom domain management permission, which will open that up, but without putting everything else on. And finally, if you do a lot of management of cookies, you'll notice in Summer 24, the browser ID _sec cookie has been removed from experiences because it's no longer needed. It's all covered by another cookie. Moving on to Marketing Cloud, starting with Marketing Cloud Account Engagement, formerly known as Pardot. So you can now send operational emails to prospects who have opted out of marketing emails directly from Engagement Studio, whereas previously you had to create list emails and send those. You can copy your images to a Salesforce CMS workspace where they can be used in future campaigns. If you use the optimizer, you'll now see alerts and feature recommendation banners. And there's version 5 of the account engagement API available, which allows you to pull related data based on relationships, create landing pages programmatically through the API, and support forms in bulk asset copy flows. Marketing Cloud Engagement, the release notes haven't come out yet. This release takes place according to the Summer 24 release notes between June 7th and June 28th. So we're expecting the release notes this week, but they weren't there when I checked a couple of hours ago. However, there is a dedicated Salesforce webinar for this that takes place on June the 27th, which gives an overview of all the new features. So that's obviously the way they prefer to do that. And you can sign up at the short link shown here. As usual, don't worry about capturing these because we'll send out the deck after the conclusion of the webinar. Marketing Cloud Growth now. This is a relatively new product. It was launched in Feb 2024. And it's marketing built on the core platform on top of Data Cloud. And there's a fair bit of investment going into this, so I've got a few slides to cover. First off, you can do more from the campaign record. You can add a templated flow and you can preview and test content without having to navigate to other parts of the application. You can add a create content status record element to a form triggered flow so that you can collect consent in your sign up forms. Users who no longer meet the conditions for your flow can be removed via exit rules. And you can add leads and contacts by as campaign members by clicking campaign members as shown with the one bubble, and then choosing to add leads or contacts from the button shown with the two bubble. So if you're used to setting up campaign members in classic marketing back in the day, very similar process there. You can configure external tracking by adding a code snippet to your website, and then you can track user engagement from there. For Marketing Cloud Growth, you can customize the engagement and fit scoring rules now to match your requirements without needing to just follow along with the standard ones from Salesforce. You can create brand styles that authors can easily apply to emails and landing pages, which gives you control over things like spacing, borders, and text formatting as well. You can share your content across marketing workspaces to reuse rather than recreate each time. Reuse is even better than recycling, as they say. But if you do need very similar but with slight changes, you can create a clone to allow you to get big quick rather than having to start from scratch every time. Landing pages next. So these support Google Recapture version 2. Note that this is Marketing Cloud Growth landing pages only. It's not available for Lightning Web Runtime or other site templates, unfortunately. And also note that you do need to register with Google to get a site key and a secret before you can use this. You can add search engine optimization properties to your landing pages. You can add the description, plus you can use link, meta, and script tags. The public page title is now a required field. You won't be able to save the page without it. And you will need to republish the marketing landing page site in Experience Builder in order for these new properties to appear. You can now preview a landing page as a guest user or as an authenticated user, so you can see what it looks like if you know who the user is or if you don't. And when you publish a landing page containing a form, you'll get to see details of the flow associated with it as a new step in the publication process. And finally, when you publish, the URL will automatically activate and become live. A few more in Marketing Cloud Growth. If you receive an unsubscribe request, you need to manually update the consent details on the lead or contact record. You can set up a data graph with the unified individual as the primary object and pull in related information to allow you to personalize your marketing efforts. You can now have some email reply management. So when you've sent from a standard address, you can select a mailbox that should receive replies. You can configure automatic replies. You can also configure automatic deletion of out of office type messages from people that receive your marketing emails. You can select a custom domain that appears in all URLs in your email message. And you can create a brief to define your key messages and audience, and then associate that with a campaign. And finally, you can add segments to campaigns, either defined by Einstein or those that you manually create. And finally, for marketing, unified messaging. So this is combining service and marketing interactions in a single channel. And if you do this, you're then able to transfer a conversation that you're currently in between marketing journeys and service agents, and view analytics about how often this has happened, etc. in Journey Builder. If you've got someone who's messaging about an issue when they're talking to your service representative, might not be good to send them promotional messages within that same conversation. So you can choose to suppress those types of messages in support interactions if you so desire. And your WhatsApp engagement queries can now include additional data of correlation ID, sender display name, and content type. Moving on to mobile. This has always recently has been quite a short section. This release is no different. You can now message customers directly from the Salesforce mobile app if you have the messaging user permission set license and you make yourself available via the Omni widget. So previously you had to be at your desktop device in order to message customers. So now there's no getting away from them. And if you have mobile app plus, then offline landing pages are now configurable with clicks rather than deployments. Once you have a configuration, you can then assign that to specific profiles, but remember you have to publish them in order to activate them. Moving on to Sales Cloud. It's all right, we are getting there. I know it's been a long one this time, but there's a lot of information in this release. Einstein sales emails. So these were available in spring 24. And as a reminder, you click the draft with Einstein button, but then in the summer 24 release, the user, if you allow them to, can choose between pre-built templates shown with the 1 bubble or freestyle in their own instructions shown with the 2 bubble, which the user then refines, does whatever they need to do, and sends it when they're happy. If you don't want users to do this, you can toggle off the ability to create their own instructions in the Einstein for Sales setup page. This is another feature I really like, personal labels. So kind of feels a bit like the old tags used to be back in classic days, etc. The difference is though, if you apply a label, it's only visible to you. So it's not visible to everybody else. So this allows you to have your own personal categorization and tracking of records. So in the screen grab here, you can see the users assigned a couple of labels to a record, including golfers, and they can then navigate to the list of labels. And from here, they can click through into a label and see all of the records that have that label. So in this case, golfers has been assigned to 3 records. But if somebody else goes and looks at those records, they won't see the golfers label because it's personalized. I can't imagine it'll be very long before people start asking, can we have labels that are accessible to public groups and things like that? But I think it's a really, really nice change. Collaborative forecasts can now be grouped by team, by forecast group, or by product family. So you select your forecast type and then you choose how you want it to roll up based on the group by drop down shown here with a little amber rectangle around it. And a few other enhancements in Sales Cloud, starting with Seller Home. If you have Prospecting Center enabled via Data Cloud, then the top prospects list shows your accounts with the best combined fit and engagement scores. The goals card now includes the user's forecast commit and a link to the related forecast, assuming that you've enabled forecasts, and the user does have to have visited the forecast page for this to work. And the Sales Blazer card now links to the Sales Blazer site for additional content, should you like it. Actions have come to intelligent views and pipeline inspection. So this includes standard and custom quick actions from the list view, the ability to select multiple records and update them all at once, and also to update multiple records in line. And finally, enterprise territory management has been renamed to sales territories, and you can now determine compensation based on the date a rep was assigned to a territory. So for example, if someone was associated with a territory when they joined the company but didn't assume ownership for a couple of weeks, you can reflect when they actually took ownership and determine their compensation based on that. And now on to our final topic for generally available features, Service Cloud. And once again, you can see I asked for an image with customer support in it, and it actually put customer support in it. Also put the Apple icon in there, which was a bit of a surprise, but I thought I'd leave that in there. Starting with generative AI features, you'll need the Einstein for Service add-on for this. Conversation mining can now handle data from messaging for in-app and for web and web to case transcripts, whereas previously it was limited to email or chat transcripts. If you're a surveys customer, you can use generative AI to summarize responses, and based on those summaries, you can use data maps to create records containing them. And the natural language processing insights dashboard provides a detailed analysis of service results based on sentiments, extracted entities, and key phrases. Conversation Catch-up now has better language support. It supports French, Italian, German, Spanish, and Japanese in addition to English. This seems to be quite a common combination. I think it must be an OpenAI thing, but you'll often see it referred to as Fix plus J. So watch out for that if you're looking for language support. And Einstein email summaries are generally available. So these provide summaries of specific messages or entire threads. There is a release update to transition to the Lightning editor to compose email to case messages. This will be enforced in spring 25, but it's a nice modern editor written in HTML5 with a bunch of additional features. So really there's no reason to put off switching, I would say. Another update enforced in spring 25 is the move to the new email threading behavior. So this basically removes the existing ref ID from the email subject or body and uses a more secure token. And if it can't match on the token, it falls back on metadata in the release headers. And one of the benefits of these threading tokens is that they're now supported for all objects that support activity tracking, whereas previously they were limited to just cases. And you can also use them in flows. They also no longer count towards storage limits. And to be honest, I was quite surprised to find that our storage limit was being consumed for an internal feature of this nature. So it's quite nice that they've stopped doing that. Messaging next. Standard WhatsApp channels will stop working in just over a year, and you won't be able to create them after June of this year, so in a couple of days. The advice here is to use enhanced WhatsApp channels instead. However, once you get to your enhanced WhatsApp channels, you might want to double down on that and migrate over to unified messaging, which we touched on in the marketing section. So this allows you to combine marketing and service messaging in a single channel. SMS and Facebook Messenger standard channels are also recommended to update to enhanced. If you've already got standard channels, you'll be able to create more, but if not, you'll only see the enhanced option going forward. As I mentioned in the mobile section, you can message customers from the Salesforce mobile app. And enhanced messaging sessions now support sensitive data rules, which allow you to block specific data patterns, which standard sessions supported before. In voice, you can reassign agents to busy queues to handle spikes in demand using the change groups button shown in the screen grab here. Although note that you do need queue management enabled. You can also choose to mask phone numbers in views, call recordings, and transcripts if you're worried about what might happen to those numbers. And the swap and hold buttons are now available for multi-party calls. And finally, knowledge. So this is an unusual development here. This release includes a 90-day free trial for Zoom-in if you choose to enable it, which allows you to unify knowledge across multiple sources, which will be limited to 3 during the trial period. So note that if you like this and you want to continue using it after the 90 days, you'll need to buy a paid license from Zoom-in. As I say, this is quite an unusual step for Salesforce, including a third-party product with this level of embedding and advertising it really in the release notes, which makes me wonder if they're trying to steer clear of acquisitions for a bit and just work with other organizations rather than attempting to buy them all the time. Yet another release update on its way, the Lightning article editor shown in the screen grab here. This will be enforced in winter 25, which sounds like a long way away, but it's just over 4 months. It's a nice editor, so I wouldn't be worried about that. Article personalization will also be turned on at this time, which is another thing why I can't really see why you'd wait, because this allows you to have visibility rules applied to article fields, so you can change what the article looks like based on the user or the permissions that are assigned to them or the contents of the record itself. And after the summer 25 release, so in a year's time, the classic knowledge data model will not be available. So you have around a year to migrate to Lightning knowledge. The key changes you'll notice is that article types are replaced with record types, and any custom user interfaces will need to be tested thoroughly to make sure they work correctly with the revised data model. As I say, it's a year away, but no reason to delay. So this brings us to the end of the generally available features. So now it's time for our sneak peek at some interesting beta items coming down the pipe. Note, as always, these may never go live, so don't make purchasing decisions based on anything you see from this point. Einstein for Flow. Interesting beta. This uses generative AI to construct a flow based on natural language instructions. So you choose to create a new flow, you select the Let Einstein Help You Build option, shown with the one bubble here. And this then opens a window where you can describe what you need from scratch, shown with the bubble 2, or you can use some sample instructions to get you started, which is where you expand the accordion for bubble 3. And the flow will then be created for you, typically with a maximum of 6 steps. But it is then on you to make sure it does what you want and is correct and isn't going to cause you any problems. Just because Einstein created it doesn't absolve you from responsibility. You can provide feedback to Einstein based on the thumbs up, thumbs down buttons shown as bubble 4. And if you really don't like it, you can click the start over button shown with a bubble 5 to start all over again. So if this is like my experience with generative AI to create code, I've found it's pretty good at creating entirely new code. What it's not so good at is reasoning about your existing code and figuring out how to use that, maybe with some changes to satisfy your requirements. So I end up with a lot of duplicate, effectively almost duplicate code. Not 100% duplicated, but a human would have refactored into a single piece of code. So if you start using this in anger, I'd say be prepared to have lots and lots of new flows, which you may not always want. Dynamic formulas in Apex. So this was in developer preview in the last release. So it's one step closer to GA now, now that it's in beta. Evaluation of dynamic formulas in Apex. So you build the formula in code, then evaluate it against a record rather than going back to the database and requerying the record. But what I particularly like about this is you don't actually even need an S-object record. You can also evaluate against an Apex custom class instance. So in this example here, I've got an inner class that wraps a string called string carrier, and I create an instance of this with some text with some fairly wild capitalization. I can then build my formula using the initcap formula function, which would normally be available within the setup menus, and I can tell that I can then target the string in my inner class, and then when I evaluate it against the inner class, my text gets converted to have the first letter of each word capitalized. So if there's, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily use this a lot of the time. A lot of things that you do in formula fields, you can redo in Apex anyway. But if there's a formula function that would take some time to replicate in Apex, then you can just use it directly. And finally, for beta, a couple of items for mobile. If you have mobile app plus, you can download records for offline use as a background task rather than having it take over your device, and just get notified when it's complete. This is one that it doesn't appear you can just opt into though. This is something you need to talk to your account executive or contact Salesforce support. And Omnichannel is available on mobile via the Omni Inbox beta. So this allows you to set your status, handle any work requests from enhanced channels apart from voice. That's the only one you can't do. And receive notification when work is assigned to you, or it's changed, or your status is changed. So allowing you to do a lot more on your mobile. So looking forward to seeing that go generally available. So this brings us to the end of the key new features in this release. As always, I've tried to pull out the ones that I think are going to be of interest to most of the attendees. There's 670 pages of release notes, so it's not possible to cover everything. But as always, if you want to get into the weeds of everything, Salesforce has a release readiness portal, which has, that's linked to the release home there. There's a trailhead badge, there's release notes, there's release in a box, there's a whole load of good stuff in there. So it should satisfy any level of curiosity. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your attention. And let me see if I've got any questions that have been posted. Oh, and I have. Can we get the deck for this from Cindy Strifle? Yes, absolutely. All attendees. So this is recorded. So we'll post the recording up onto our YouTube channel relatively soon after this. And then everybody who registered gets a link to the recording and to the slide deck. Oh, and then a lovely thank you from Will. Thanks, Will. Nice to be appreciated. So I'm guessing there's no other questions. It's just coming up to 5 to 5. So nicely between the 45 to 60 minutes that we publicized this at. Thanks for your attention, everyone. Hopefully I'll see you at the next one in winter in October. Thanks again.